Disclaimer: I don't have my shit together in the way a person of my age in this society would be expected to. Feeling as I have for over a decade plus that something was not right, I found it very hard to remain franchised within the confines. To quote the great Krishnamurti, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a sick society. And whilst I couldn't put my finger on it, I very much knew that there was something in the pipe. And so I focused more on gathering information and preparing myself in a way to handle an unknown future that wasn't dependent necessarily on assets and investments, on savings, but more on abilities. And so I've kept myself poised for mobility. I've focused on learning practical skills and acquiring basic tools and figuring out how to reconstruct the more complex from the more simple in case of the great emergency, whatever form it took. I think if you look over the course of human history, modeling what's going to happen is rather difficult. But seeing what's successful in times of great change is not so hard. You can see who survives. It's not always the man with all the money. It's not always the man with the property. It's not always the best educated. It's the most adaptable. And so that's where I've put my effort, into understanding some basic things that will be useful in a minimized time. A time where economics breaks down, a time where the modern comforts are gone. I've spent a decade or more getting used to not having much, getting by with very little. And yes, I've been blessed with some generosity. I haven't paid rent in a number of years. I live in an old school bus on my parents' farm. I borrow some of their electricity in my attempts to get off grid. Yeah. I don't have my shit together in the way that most people think. But when it comes to change, I'm very adaptable. I'm a quick learner. I'm a critical thinker. I don't take what I'm told at face value. I always question the motive of the speaker and the benefit of the outcomes they propose. That's your two greatest tools when you have low intel. The two questions: where does the money go and who benefits? They're not always the same question. It's not just about money. Just like a communist defense of communism is true. Communism has never been tried. There have been very few times in human history when true capitalism has been tried. America from somewhere in the 1880s to the Second World War is probably the prime example. And the reason I've come to be a capitalist, despite my very leftist roots in politics, is that it's undeniable that that was the greatest single development of society on a technological and a wealth basis in human history. It was the freest men have been in the last 1,000 years. And it's the reason why America rose to the top in terms of standard of living. Not so much on the world power front, that was more to do with the military industrial complex, I won't deny that. So America's technological developments with tax dollars and private interests on the war front that really put it on the leading edge after the war. But before the war was the best time to be an American citizen. You reaped the rewards of the work you did. You weren't ridiculously taxed. They were taxed, but the World War II income tax, which was supposed to be a temporary tax to fund the war effort, has crippled every generation since in every Western country and probably in every country in the world that claims to be a capitalist nation. But there's nothing capitalist about a massive bureaucracy and an effective tax rate of 55%. It's anti-market. Providing services people didn't ask for is not a good business model. It's extortion. And it can't last, which is why this is all happening. It's been known for a long time that the modern economies of the world were a Ponzi scheme. The fractional reserve banking system has been slowly but surely hollowing out the value of a dollar for the last 70 years with the same surety as the Romans did by debasing their silver currency until the legionnaires would no longer take it as payment. And that was the real reason for the downfall of the Roman Empire. And that's where we are now. It's not just America, it's the entire formerly capitalist nations as a bloc that have been captured by a uniparty and its policies and an ever-expanding bureaucracy, needless involvement of the government in our daily lives. All government should be there to do is to protect the border from foreign invasion and to protect the human rights, which are a priori as a consequence of you being a conscious being, which is what people in days gone past meant when they said God-given rights. They didn't literally mean a gift from God. They meant human life is divine. To some extent, all conscious beings have a divine spark in them, no matter what creed you follow. Science can't answer what consciousness is, so it has no claim over those domains, which is why, despite everything else, human rights are sacrosanct. No government has the right to ride roughshod over your rights. And when I saw increasingly that encroachment, they start with the outliers and the downtrodden, but slowly but surely, they're climbing into your lounge room and deciding how you should live. I knew I did not want to be well placed in that structure. That to do so, thinking what I think and knowing what I know would have been very dishonest. And I don't want to be a dishonest person at the core. It was a mild inkling before, but now that I'm a father, it's a strong conviction. I don't want him to turn around one day and say, everything you've told me is bullshit because you're a fucking sellout. And I'd rather we were materially poor, but true to our principles, than to have everything and be a two-faced lying son of a bitch, especially to myself. Because eventually, that shit will eat away at what it is that we call a soul. You don't need to be a religious person to fall victim to that. Terrible spot for a cigarette on such a windy day. And I think at the moment we're being led by people who have denied this fact and have had something gnawing away at their soul. And it's turning them into horrendous creatures. The completely unrailed rantings of Michael Gunner being the chief signal. Look at that man. Look at him when he speaks. Ardern across the pond, no better. A little more sure of herself, perhaps. But there is something very wrong in the hearts of those two, and many, many others. Even old Scummo, he's trying to avoid showing us the rot in his heart by avoiding the cameras. Despot Dan just made himself king for eternity in Victoria, and the first thing he does is fuck off on holiday. I'm not advocating any of these minor parties. I'm not advocating for anything currently on offer, really. I'd like to see a radical change in how we do things and a minimization of government power over individuals who are doing nothing wrong, who should be free to live their lives as they see fit, because that is the only thing that has raised human standards of living. No government policy has delivered better lives for the individuals who live under it. It's usually a cost to those people for something they didn't ask for, regardless of how many costs they already have. I think we live under an effective tax rate of something like 60% in this country. And with inflation and soon carbon taxes, well, imagine where we'll be. And on that happy note, I'm going to sign off. I might deliver some thoughts on a different topic later. I'll see you when I see you. Peace, love, and kung fu. Informed Descent out.